let's start off with discussing very quickly and generally your latest book, Mr. Scruton, the uses of pessimism. What are the uses of pessimism? Why shouldn't we just be optimistic?
I think we should be optimistic about those things where optimism has some kind of foundation. But my theme in the book is that a certain kind of optimism, which Schopenhauer called unscrupulous optimism, has a grip on the human psyche, and it's something which constantly comes back. This desire to cling to hope when it simplifies the reality, and there goes with this desire fallacious ways of thinking which may once have been useful to our species, but which are useful no longer. And those fallacious ways of thinking, I believe, have penetrated the culture of the modern world, and they have a kind of dynamic of their own. They're constantly producing new policies, new conclusions, new perspectives on the human world. And the main uses of pessimism is to put an obstacle in the path of those fallacies, to say, stop thinking that there is a solution. Just remember that the best we can do is live with the problem.
Yes, you describe a type of person in your book, the unscrupulous optimist. What kind of person is that?
Well, there are many different kinds of these optimists, but fundamentally it's somebody who, when faced with the complexity of the human condition, decides he has to have a solution to it. Whereas the personality that I would recommend in the place of that is the one who, when faced with the complexity of the human condition, says, yes, the human condition is complex. And
there's nothing we can do about it.
Or maybe I can make small adjustments at the edges, but I must learn to live with these monsters all around me and try and establish some kind of consensus with them.
Can you give a number of examples of these fallacious ways of thinking that the unscrupulous optimist applies, and some of the disastrous consequences in your view?
In the book I take a few examples. One, which I think is extremely important and has been important here in the Netherlands as well as in England, is what I call the born-free fallacy. The fallacy of thinking that, with Rousseau and people like that the human beings are naturally free. But what one must do is take away all the constraints that are imposed upon them by civilization. Constraints of custom, law, institutions, even things like the curriculum, those foundations of the social order which we tend to take for granted. I think that fallacy has been very important in revolutionary movements, very important also in the reforms of education that went on in Europe after the war.
Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yes.
So the born-free fallacy and education, how do they...
The superstition arose during the 50s and 60s that children need to release their inner freedom and enjoy that natural curiosity which children have, and that the idea of a settled, structured curriculum in which you learn things by heart, in which you do maths for half an hour, English for half an hour, Latin for half an hour, and so on. All these things are oppressive, destroying the natural freedom of the child. Really, we want to be releasing that freedom. Therefore, the curriculum has to be opened up, made free, made non-judgmental. And I think that was a fashionable view which spread through educational practice all over the continent of Europe, and I think was very destructive of our intellectual inheritance.
Because people are not born free, in your opinion?
People become free, and it's a hell of an effort to become free. You become free through a long discipline of obedience. That's the fundamental thought.
Mr. van Rossem, you've worked almost all your life in education, or large part of your life so far. Do you recognize any of these analyses by
Yeah,
Mr.
I'm afraid I agree completely with that idea.
Is this the first time in your life that you agree completely with someone?
When it comes to education, I'm an extremely conservative person, and this whole idea that that students, in my case students of course, university students, should be left to their own creative devices is not a particularly good idea at all. And we had this small seminar groups where the idea was, of course, of a lively discussion about the wonderful ideas that the students have developed over the week. And the problem is they don't develop wonderful ideas over the week. And the whole idea that the classical teaching situation where a teacher is in front of a group of students, that is completely wrong and authoritarian and so forth and so on, I think is unjust and has created big problems in universities.
That's very
so I think what we need in education is much more old-fashioned ideas. We shouldn't go back to the 50s. There must be some golden middle way. I'm always a consensus seeker. But
no longer focusing on the idea that
and discipline should come back into education, because without any discipline, education is nothing, actually.
Another theme that you describe in your book, another fallacy that you talk about, is the idea that politics should always be aimed at some kind of utopian end. Can you elaborate on that a bit?